Thank you. Bye.
I think we're live.
We're live.
Live.
Hi to everybody out there. I'm sorry that we're a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties. We can't bring up our slides. So we're going to talk you through inside college admission. And the slides will be up later on for you to download if you want to. I'm Katherine Leary, and I'm the founding member of School Placement Solutions. I've been a teacher and in admission for over 20 years. I've been the director of admission at 2 different offices. So I've seen admission from pretty much every perspective, the perspective of the student, the parent, the director of admission, and teachers in the school. Caitlyn.
So I'm Caitlyn Worsham. I have graduated from Brown with a degree in writing and from Tulane also with a degree in writing. So writing is sort of my thing. I've been in admissions for over a decade. I've toggled between Asia and the United States, and it's been my great pleasure to get to know students all over the world and help them with the admissions process. So just recently I had the opportunity to be in Toronto meeting with a bunch of admissions representatives. So though I've mostly worked on this side of the desk, I've gotten access to people like Katherine and to admissions representatives around the world to help you guys better understand the process.
One of the biggest questions we always get from rising 9th and 10th graders and also parents is, tell us about what happens in the admission process. A lot of people know about the application side, but they don't know what happens to your applications once it's been submitted. So one of the things that we intend to do in this presentation is to talk to you about what it looks like on the other side after you hit and submit to your Common App or whatever. First thing we want to talk about is there's several different kinds of applications, and you may not be familiar with that. The first one I think that almost everybody knows is the Common Application. The next one is the Coalition Application, which is very similar to the Common Application. A lot of schools take both the Common Application or the Coalition Application. Most of the information in both of those applications is the same. The third kind of application is the University of California application, different from the Common App and the Coalition App and specific to California schools only. And basically that's one application for all of the California schools. Design school applications are a little bit different in the sense that they're looking less for test scores, more for portfolios. That would be Rhode Island School of Design, Savannah School of Art and Design, schools like that. And then occasionally you'll have an individual school application specific to that school only. They don't take the Common App or the Coalition App. And that would be a school, one example would be College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina, or Guilford here in North Carolina.
So to add to that, some of the differences between the applications, everyone's going to have a complaint. No one's going to tell you that an application is user-friendly and fun, but ultimately the application formats have gotten a lot easier and there are lots of walkthroughs for students. So if you don't have a guide, there are typically very, very easy ways to find an easily navigable path through that application format, even if it's maybe not your favorite format.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Feel free to ask us questions on the side or after our presentation. Let's go to the next slide, is the kinds of things, the first look that admissions officers give your applications once it's submitted. And these are pretty much in order of what admission officers report as being the most important to them. And that's another question we ask all the time, we get asked all the time, is my essay the most important, test scores, what is it that admission officers look at first? The most important thing are your grades or your GPA, and that includes your AP test scores.
Or your course rigor if it's an IB curriculum or any course rigor at all, right? So, you know, lots of people, for engineers, for example, now are done with AP Calc BC by the time they actually finish junior year depending on where they want to go to an engineering program. So that has to do with a combination of course rigor and GPA.
And like Caitlyn said, the strength of your curriculum. If you're just taking average courses, that's not going to strengthen your GPA as much as if you're in an honors program or a college prep program. Also, as many AP courses as you can possibly take for the higher tier schools. The next thing that's really important is your essays. Essays are, you want to grab the person's attention right away, the person who's reading your application. Sometimes the person who's the first person to open your application could be someone that's fairly new to admission. And so you want to have a compelling essay that stands out from a lot of different kinds of other people that would be writing. And we're going to talk more about that in another session. Your teacher recommendations are extremely important. Caitlyn, do you want to talk a little bit about those?
We did jump past test scores. So if it goes course rigor, then it goes test scores, depending on where you are in the world, just to backtrack a little bit. So it'll go course rigor and GPA test scores after that. So that might include an SAT and an ACT if you're advanced. As far as your school list, as far as the difficulty goes, you might have to take the SAT-2s, which are the subject tests, which you would know based on your coursework and could maybe ask someone helping you, or of course ask someone like me or Katherine to help you with. And then if, of course, you're in a different part of the world, if you're in Asia or in an international country somewhere, goodness knows where, or have some sort of non-standardized US curriculum, you may have to take the TOEFL or the IELTS. So those are gonna be your standardized testing. And then if we move into the teacher recs, as Katherine suggested, the people who are writing your recs are gonna be the people who are focused on areas where maybe you're interested in pursuing in the future, right? So if that's going to be, if you're going to be looking at a applied maths major, you would be looking at your math teacher to help you with one of your original teacher recs, or that would be your counselor, depending on what kind of situation that you're in. So usually it's one counselor rec and 2 teacher recs, depending on what you're gunning for.
I would add that teacher recs are the hardest thing to control. I mean, the teachers are in complete and total control of your teacher recs, and no one's allowed to read them except the readers in the admission department at the college. So you want to make sure that you choose a teacher that you feel very comfortable with, that you're certain is going to give you a really good recommendation. You can also, if the teacher asks, you can develop some adjectives to describe yourself and give those adjectives to your teacher so that they can use those adjectives to describe you. And also that makes sure that your adjectives that you're using similar adjectives to describe yourself in your essays. Do you agree with that, Caitlyn?
Yeah, and just to add to that, some teachers, you guys may be familiar with this, want you to fill out extremely long worksheets involving basically what they're going to say in their recommendation for you. So she's absolutely right in that you don't have control, but sometimes if you are given one of those counselors or teachers, you do have at least some contribution to content, but what they end up putting in there, you're never gonna know.
So let's move on to activities. There are 2 different ways to present your activities in the applications. Some schools like activity lists, some schools like resumes. They're basically the same thing. You want to put the most important activity at the very top of the list and the one that you're most passionate about and spend the most time doing. Of course, the more leadership activities that you have, the better. And those go to the top of the list, as well as any jobs that you might have carried out, anything from working in McDonald's to babysitting. The key to the activities is that you want to be specific in exactly what you're doing in those activities and how long you spend doing each. But activities are very important because schools want to look at what you're doing now and consider what you're going to be doing or contributing to the school community when you attend that school. Caitlyn, do you have anything to add?
I would just add that the level of engagement in your activities is going to vary massively depending on what kind of school you're aiming for. Some people who are gunning for highly selective schools might have what ends up starting off as a 3 to 4 page long resume that of course they're not going to submit in that capacity to the university maybe, but that's actually how much they've done. So one of the things that you get to have to figure out is how to curate all of the amazing things that you've done over your 4 years of high school. Again, if that means babysitting, or if that means being student body president, or heading the newspaper, or doing whatever things that you've done, that's part of the framing that you get to have as part of your creativity in the process.
And the next thing on the list is demonstrated interest. Some of the schools, like some of the bigger California schools, will say that that's not terribly important to them. I find that difficult to believe. Something called yield, meaning the number of students that actually attend the school after being admitted, is going down. Schools are having a very difficult time figuring out who's going to come after they admit them. And the goal for schools is to have as many students attend as they possibly can after being admitted. So if you demonstrate interest to the school, that actually strengthens your application at the school. The way you demonstrate interest is to visit. It's incredibly important. Sign into the admission office and do a tour. Afterwards, schools will often send you emails. Make sure you open those emails, respond if it's appropriate. If they send you any kind of communication at all, make sure that you respond to that, at least open the communication. They also count the number of clicks on their website. So you want to make sure you go to the website, crawl all over it, look at all of the activities that they offer, all of the different programs that they offer, and become really familiar with that. They do follow you and the number of times that you look at them on the internet. It's kind of creepy, but that's what they do. Caitlyn,
Big Brother is totally watching, guys. Not every school, of course, is serious about this, but anyone who's interested in data science out there, or marketing tracking, or anything like that, knows that this is where the money is going as far as marketing is going. And so it's a little bit alarming, because they're not just tracking the things that Katherine said. Some schools are even tracking how quickly you open the emails. And that's a little bit frightening to me as someone who actually cares about the process of education. So the level at which you want to engage in the demonstrated interest process should really reflect your interest in the school. So I would say be cognizant of the fact that it's a little bit of an ugly game at this stage, but you know that there are people watching, and you just need to be aware of that, and we want you guys to be aware of that.
The next thing on the list is class rank. One of the things you need to be aware of when you're applying to a certain school, especially if you're in-state and applying to some of the top-tier in-state schools, public schools in your state, is how many other students are applying to that school, what those students look like in terms of where they are in your class. So, for example, if you know there are 30 or 40 kids applying to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and you're not in the mix of the top tier of those kids, just kind of try to know that you may not have the best chances of getting in. So as highly ranked as you can possibly be, as awful as that sounds, is better, especially if you're trying to get into those top tier public universities in your own state. They do look at that. Caitlyn?
Even if it's, most students might say that you have no official rank, or many students might say you have a no official ranking in your school. We're not talking about like the ranking by number in your school, like are you valedictorian, are you salutatorian, or are you 200 out of however many. It's more of a conceptual ranking. So you're evaluated within your school pool. That's what's important to know.
Yes. And portfolio or video, if submitted. Caitlyn, why don't you talk about that? You've done a lot of work with design schools.
So depending on the type of school that you're applying to, it could be a tech school, it could be a design school, it could be a very rigorous math program, it could be a bio program. Lots of students do academic portfolios and or videos to showcase the quality of research and or just project-based work that they've done. So it really depends on the student. So it could be a photography portfolio, it could be documentation of an engineering concept that you've executed, or an architectural concept that you've executed, like building a tiny house or doing something like that. So depending on your level of proficiency and how much work you've done, you may or may not have a portfolio. Students who typically get into super selective schools do have this component. It features into the interview, it features into the activity list, it features into the essays, probably features into the recs, it kind of features everywhere. So depending on the kind of school that you're going to, that might be a key part of your application, or it might not be a super relevant part, right? The UC system is a very large system, as an example that was mentioned earlier, and they don't have time necessarily to review student portfolios.
Some schools offer interviews, and if the school offers you an interview, even if it's optional, it's in your best interest to do the interview. A lot of schools, larger schools, will offer alumni interviews. That means that you'll meet the alumni at a Starbucks or something. An interview is something it's really important for you to prepare for your interview. Caitlyn and I could do a whole other presentation just on the interview, but it's extremely important. You need to know a lot about the school before you go to that interview, and you need to present a compelling case for why you should be admitted to that school. Caitlyn, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Just interviews and portfolios are not just university specific. Just to clarify, they're also program specific within a system. So that's important to note as well. So if you're trying to figure out what hoops you have to jump through to get into X program, don't just pay attention to the university specific requirements. You might also have additional program requirements.
And then finally, legacy or donor. If your parents went to a specific school that does, actually admission offices, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but they add points for different aspects of your application, the ones that we've already gone through: grades, test scores, strength of curriculum, essays, teacher X activities. So every one of those things get you points. If your parents went to a school, that gets you added points to your application, especially if they were very involved in the school while they were there, or if they donated money, no matter how large or small. Of course, larger, better, but it is part of the thing that it is something that they definitely consider. And it gives you, statistics show that it gives you a pretty big bump in your position in the school, in the application pool.
Though luckily that's becoming a little bit more contentious, I think, as we move forward in the universe. But since Katherine was one of the major readers of applications for a long time, she's going to go into our next talking point of who is reading, right? Who reads and what are they really looking at? So that's to you, Katherine.
Thanks. Okay, so like we said, the person who's generally reading your application first is often your regional rep. When your regional rep comes to your school, make sure you go up to them and introduce yourself. You want to make sure that they have a face to go with the name. And you can actually even get that representative's card and write them appropriate emails. Of course, there's something, that can be considered oversharing, so you don't want to bombard them with emails. But after your meeting, it's perfectly appropriate to go ahead and write them a note by email saying it was great to meet you, and I'm specifically interested in going to University of Carolina at Chapel Hill because I want this specific program. So your regional rep is usually the one that reads your whole application first, does rank you, and they're often the person that presents you to the admission committee. Please know that that person is oftentimes not the most senior ranked person in the admission office. So they don't have the final say in your application, but you want to have a good relationship with them, because if they really like you and they have a little relationship with you, they will tend to advocate for you. And again, they look at your transcript first, including your AP courses. We've heard a lot of kids lately say that teachers have been telling them it's okay to submit a 3 on an AP test. Caitlyn and I think, are both in agreement that a 3 is probably not really a score that you want to submit to a school unless it's a lower tier, a lower ranked school. They usually then go to your teacher X. And by the way, People in admission offices read every application in a consistent way. Everybody has their own way of reading. In other words, sometimes people go directly to the teacher recs. Sometimes they go directly to your test scores first or your essay first, but they always read every application in the same way. So usually they'll look at your teacher recs next to get a kind of a flavor of who you are. They look at your activities. Then they'll read your main essay. Sometimes they'll read the essay first, but not always. Supplemental essays. A lot of kids think that supplemental essays are not that important, but I'm here to tell you that they are every bit as important as your main essay. And sometimes readers will go to your supplemental essays first because they're shorter, and they just want to get through them and get an idea of who you are. So pay attention to those supplements. If they say they're optional, do them anyway. Caitlyn and I always tell the students we work with that there's no such thing as an optional anything. If you have an option to do an essay, do it. And then, of course, if you have a special passion, if you're a musician, if you're an artist of some sort, if you have anything that you can make a portfolio with, definitely do that and submit it with your common application to the school. Sometimes you have to submit directly to the admission office. I know, Caitlyn, you've had a lot of experience doing that, if you want to talk about it.
I would say one of the things that really matters holistically for an application for your reader is the consistency. So some students who decide to add a school super last minute will suddenly come up with a supplemental essay super last minute, and it's not very well edited or very well executed. And if you have one essay that's excellent and one essay that's meh, they're gonna notice that and think that's a little bit odd, and it's not gonna look well for you in a holistic capacity. So if you're thinking about your school list and you're thinking about the way that you're presenting as an applicant, try to be consistent with all of the components of what you're presenting. Not repetitive, right? You don't want every essay to say the same thing, but consistent in the way that you're presenting yourself and the narrative, the overarching narrative that you're trying to tell.
Okay, so let's talk about, we went through who reads. Let's talk about what it looks like inside the admission office. So we said the first reader is generally your regional manager. After the regional manager, or the regional representative, or the first reader of your portfolio and your application is done, everything is ranked. It's usually sent around to either a subcommittee on the admission office, or depending on the size of the admission office. If it's a small admission office, everybody will read your application. If it's a larger office, they usually have subcommittees by region or country, or some sort of subset. So that will go on to secondary readers. All of those people will read separately and rank you separately. Then they come to admission committee. That actually looks like a table with everybody sitting around with a folder with your application in it. And a discussion will ensue. If you don't reach a certain point threshold, remember we talked about how they give points to every single part of your application. You have to meet a certain point threshold to be discussed. If you haven't met that point threshold, they're not discussing you generally. Once you meet the point threshold, everybody will have a discussion on you. It will go into a pile of definite or come back to. Come back tos are after they finished all of the definite admission, they come back to you, you get a wait list or hopefully an admission offer. The final decision at the end is made by the committee, and then the director of admission oversees that.
And again, there's going to be a lot of variety office to office, region to region. So if you're coming out of a very small region, you might actually only have one person really reading your application, very small school, very small region, one person really reading your app, advocating for you at the committee level. Otherwise, you might have gone through a variety of numerical catalogs before arriving to committee or never arriving to committee, depending again on the size of the admission office.
And just to kind of recap of the decision factors that go into that, your class rank or where you are relative to the other kids applying from your school to that particular school and what they're looking for. Yield, which is, does the admission committee believe that you will attend if they admit you. They don't want to offer to students that they don't think are going to come. They only want to offer to kids that they believe will come. Diversity, what do you bring to the school? Do you bring a fresh perspective? Even within a lot, we get this question from a lot of kids. They'll say, oh, but I'm just that white middle class kid from Connecticut. You want to think about what you bring to the school to offer as a different perspective. And a lot of kids have one regardless of their background. It's just something that you have to think about and distinguish yourself. And then how many students want to go to that particular school from your geographic area. For example, if you're going to a large public university in your state and you're applying to the one that's most difficult to get into, they're not going to take everybody from your school or everybody who's ranked in the top 30. So it really, they have to balance boys and girls. If it's a public school and it's co-education, they just have to kind of balance the numbers and build a class. And that's what they're trying to do in the admission committee. So those are basically the 4 main factors that go into the decision.
And just to clarify really quickly one more time, when we're talking about rank, we're talking about generally how you stack up against your applicant pool, not a specific class rank.
Most schools, I don't think, do. I know public schools do. A lot of schools don't do specific class rank, but you have a pretty good idea generally about where you are relative to the kids who are applying to a certain school. And if you don't, you can ask your college counselor. They can't often give you specifics, but they can give you a general idea if you ask your college counselor. You agree with that, Caitlyn?
I would agree. I would say the one thing that we haven't talked about that's so important and is a huge factor, which we should definitely mention now before it's too late, is the big green monster in the room. So Katherine, financial aid. How does that factor into the admissions process?
Whoa. Well, first of all, people have to understand, a lot of people don't understand financial aid and how it works. But let's talk about, basically, there are 2 forms of financial aid. One is merit-based, meaning that it doesn't have anything to do with how much money you have or what you own. It is purely offered for your academics or sports. There are no ties to it. Generally, it renews year to year, although it does often. There's a contract that comes with it and they do review it year to year, but it's generally a 4-year offer. People think there is more merit aid offered than actually happens. If you actually look at the statistics of merit aid offered, it's quite a small number. The second most important form of financial aid is called need-based aid. For that, you need to fill out a FAFSA form. Your college can help with that.
Unless you're international, in which case it's important as an international student to know that there are explicitly stated only 5 remaining need blind, meaning they don't consider your need as part of the admissions process, need blind institutions for internationals left in the entire United States system. And increasingly students are not need blind either for national students. So that means that financial aid, depending on which school you're applying to, could be a huge part of whether or not you get into a school.
And let's just define need blind. Need blind technically means that the school does not, when they're looking at your application, they don't look to see if you've applied for financial aid. So your financial aid application has nothing to do with in a need blind decision, has nothing to do with whether they admit you or not. I'm going to be cynical here and say I don't think there's any institution that really and truly is need blind. They can't be. The way financial aid works is it spins off of what's called a school endowment. So the bigger your school, if you're applying to a school, you do want to look at their endowment, because the bigger the school's endowment, the more financial aid they usually have to offer. An endowment is money that is given to the school and invested. What spins off of that investment over the average of 3 years is what that school has to offer in terms of financial aid. And that's for the need-based aid, not merit aid. So the bigger the endowment, the more financial aid offered usually. You can go to a school profile on Naviance, or College Planner Pro is the application platform that I use to see how much financial aid is offered. That information is also, you can get to it through the College Board, sometimes the school's website. There are actually calculators that you can also use that I believe is on the College Board website to find out how much, to project how much financial aid, need-based financial aid, you can expect to be offered. Your financial aid offer will differ from school to school, but generally, if the school feels that they can't meet your need, they won't offer you admission. It doesn't mean that you're not admissible. It just means that they can't meet your need. Caitlyn, is there anything else you want to say to that? Unfortunately, that's an unfortunate policy.
Yeah, I would say the people there are schools who will admit you if it doesn't necessarily look like you can pay, just because they're not weighing financial aid. There's so much variance that it's an extremely complicated process. And one of the things you really want to check on is how experienced whoever is helping you with this process is with financial aid. Because again, there's massive disparity between how people distribute it.
Caitlyn and I also have resources for financial aid information. If you want to write to us and ask us about it, we can give you the names of some sources. Also know that every school varies in their financial aid policy. So one of the questions, a legitimate question to write to your regional rep, is to write to them and ask them about their policies for financial aid, whether it has any impact on your admission or not.
So that brings us to the other thing that's not really about merit as far as academics go, right? So financial aid is an extra piece to that, and it doesn't matter if you're the greatest kid in the world. Sometimes financials are going to play a role. Maybe they already have, right? So the same is true for athletes. So very often an athlete may or may not know well before a standard student whether or not he or she has gained admissibility to an institution due to something called a letter of support by a coach. So there's been a lot of bad talk about this, bad talk about, again, legacy and donor situations going through the wrong channels recently as far as scandals go. And I would say, most athletes obviously are very, very talented people who've worked very, very hard to get where they are. And it is just an extra piece of the applicant pool because they are trying to create diversity and build teams that are going to be successful and fun to watch play. And it is a complicated piece of the admissions process, but that is something that we can't always control. So if you're at a great school, but there are 3 athletes who are already supported by letters of interest to your preferred institution out of your school, for example, that might detrimentally affect your application. Depending on the size of the school, the size of your school, lots of other factors, but.
Yeah. Caitlyn, do you want to go? You do the next slide.
Okay, so what I wanted to talk about, guys, and this is, guys, I have to apologize because I'm in Vietnam and Catherine's in the United States, and we're just literally on the other side of the world right now. And we've been having some technical issues this morning, right? Which is always interesting because you wonder what happens when the admissions office shuts down technically, right? What does happen? So what I wanted to do is give you some interesting data points and open this up to some quick questions about, so we've got a couple of questions, right? And we're gonna get to those in a minute. But I wanted to post, I'm not sure if everyone can see the chat box, some data points. So I had 4 student data points that I wanted to share with you guys. So I can see everyone, and I'm gonna pop it in the chat box, and I think everyone can see. Can someone reply if they can see those data points in the chat box on your right on the screen? Cool, yes, all right, great, thank you. So cool, so I have 4 real students, obviously not a whole lot of details on those students. 2 of them are not applicable TOEFL scores. 2 of them have applicable TOEFL scores. That doesn't necessarily speak to nationality, that just speaks to whether or not they needed to submit. So we had 4 students, and then we had 4 schools. And what I thought was interesting is just telling you which schools they got into. So there was Cornell, there was Swarthmore, there was Brown, and there was University of Southern California. State of Southern, not to be confused with South Carolina, which is where I'm from. Very different institutions, guys. You don't want to mess those up. So I have just popped
One is
those.
a little bit easier to get into than the other.
Yeah, that's right. So don't disparage my home state. Anyway, so there are these 4 institutions and there are these 4 students. So I am super interested in those of you watching. I know not everyone is going to be watching this live. Does anybody have an idea where student 1 went? Does anyone want to offer up an option based on data points? Which of these 4 schools? You would guess Brown. Okay. Anyone else? Does anyone want to disagree with Brandon? Okay. Anyone else?
Maybe they want to tell us why. I'd love to hear why.
I would love to hear why too. Brandon, do you have a pick?
Oh, no.
He's backtracking. He's like, no. What do you think?
No, Brendan doesn't want to tell us why. Oh, wait.
Okay, Brandon. You're looking at the data points. That's absolutely right. What's interesting is that so often, right, these are the intangibles that we're trying to talk about, right? So sometimes someone has a great counselor or a great set of luck or is a great student or is great at whatever, right? And they're the intangibles, right? How did this kid get there, right? So the fallout isn't like you would think. So student number 2, Sally, any thoughts? Are you still around, Sally?
Sally left us.
Or Avery? Avery or Sally, any thoughts? Concepts?
Not really.
Okay. All right. So, but it's a game, right? And it's so interesting if you get to read the essays too, because if I were able to share these 4 student essays, and this is what we do when we work with students, is you have to read the essays, pair them with the data points, and pair them with the school. And nobody ever gets it right. And that is what an admissions committee is doing, right? They're always getting something subjectively wrong from what we would think, right? So just in case you were wondering, student number 1 went to Swarthmore. Student number 2 went to University of Southern California. Student number 3 went to Brown, and student number 4 went to Cornell. So really, really, really not necessarily commensurate with the data that you're gonna Google when you're like, well, what are college boards, medium scores? And so that's something that Catherine and I really enjoy doing. Again, when we have time to add the essay portions in, it's super exciting because nobody seems to agree on where anyone should go. And that's ultimately what highly selective schools are having to deal with. Because there are so many great kids out there, it's not always easy to break it down. So that was the little, the sort of which school and why idea. Ultimately, right, if you are presenting yourself as the best applicant you can be, that's all that matters, right? The test scores matter, the GPA matters, the activities matter, but at the end of the day, you have your own data set and you have to frame that in a way that's gonna speak to the institution. And over the 4 years, at the end of the day, that's what you really get to frame and get to work on. So depending on where you are in process, we're gonna be doing a number more of these videos, hopefully with better internet connectivity. Sorry about that, guys. And hopefully from different parts of the world, because by next week, I'm hoping to be back in the United States. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. I know that the slideshow that did not go up is gonna be shared with you after this. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pop our contact information while we're addressing some of the questions that were popped in the questions section here. But the contact information has been popped in, and then I'm gonna look at, you had 3 questions. So one is, how does the admissions office feel about taking an AP course but not taking the exam?
Oh, I would question.
Can I answer that, or do you want to answer that, Catherine?
You go ahead. If I think I have to add something, I will. It's a great.
So typically when a student doesn't take the exam or doesn't report the score, it's assumed the student didn't do super well. So so there's an additional information section of the Common App And there's, of course, a counselor recommendation that's required. So if there's a reason to not take the AP that might involve something specific, or if there's a reason to not take the AP that's maybe not emergency related, but that just involves you're not feeling like you would do well, there are ways to explain that. So that would answer that question. Katherine, did we lose you? I think we lost Katherine. Someone else asked a question, do certain universities actually blacklist schools and turn down all students from a school? I talk to university reps all the time. I would say occasionally, in a very, very rare instance, there might be a little bit of bad blood between a counselor and a school, a representative and a counselor at a school, but never the school itself. I don't think any admissions representative is really doing that, but lots of people at certain schools will be like, well, you know, my boarding school, everybody, Columbia hates my boarding school. And I'm like, that's simply not true, right? So that's an excellent question. But I would say for the most part, that is a myth. And that explains maybe why certain students who felt that they deserved to get into a space didn't get in. One student asked, if my family does not qualify for financial aid, how can I learn more about merit scholarships? There are a number of options now for merit-based aid. Sorry about that. Resources. So we can share those with you if you want to follow up after this chat. One of them, historically, a lot of them are paid for, which I don't really like. And then a lot of them are just very small merit-based sources. So like, I would say the legwork that you have to put in to get the merit-based aid can be aggressive. So it depends on how much merit you're looking, what you're looking to get merit for, how much work you're willing to put in.
I'm back.
Etc.
Did you see me disappear?
Catherine, that's okay. I think I still had it unless I got cut off.
No, I disappeared.
Right, but you're hosting the chat, so I'm not sure.
Are we still live?
Avery, did I answer your comments? If Avery's still around, did you get that about merit-based scholarship rather? Okay, I'm still live. Okay. And then, is there a regional representative for all international students? So that's an excellent question. The regional representatives will vary by region, as you might imagine. So for example, I work a lot in Southeast Asia, I work in East Asia, and they're often not the same rep. So China is a very large territory. So if you were out of China, that might be a separate rep. Southeast Asia would probably typically include the same rep. So we're a smaller region. So Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, possibly Indonesia, possibly Singapore, possibly Malaysia, like these may or may not be lumped in. Again, it's going to be school specific. So one of the cool things that admissions pages are increasingly doing is they're actually posting your regional rep on the admissions page. Super selective schools don't do that, and you're not going to necessarily have a point of contact with those people. But typically admissions pages have gotten a little bit better about making that process transparent. So you should be able to get in touch with your rep. There are lots of, if you're international, Education USA is one of those areas that you can go to find additional resources for regional representatives. If you're in the United States or somewhere that's maybe an international school, you should have a counselor who could tip you off to that information. Or there might be an independent educational consultant, a licensed one like we are in your area. So
that's opposed to an agent, and there is a difference between a consultant and an agent.
That's right.
So consultants we visit schools, we go to conferences regularly. We have personal relationships with schools. Schools do not pay us for students. Agents generally get paid by school, and they don't often visit schools regularly. I would add to it, piggyback on what Caitlyn said, I've actually been working in China since 2007 and go there a couple of times a year. I will tell you that if it's at all possible, if you're an international student, you should visit the school. It makes a big difference for you to come and visit and get some face time. The things that schools, Caitlyn and I just read in NACAC, and Caitlyn can say what that stands for, report. But what all of the schools said, the number one thing for them with international students is their understanding, their ability to read, speak, and write English. So if you can get in front of a rep and talk to them and demonstrate your English. That's always better. Also, what some of the schools have been seeing is just because you have a 110 on a TOEFL doesn't necessarily mean your English is that great. It just means you've studied a lot for the test. So you really should try to demonstrate your English as best you can in your writing. Don't ever, ever have anyone else write your essays, ever.
So there's so much that we were unable to get to today. I mean, we could do an entire hour or 10 on interviews, on the main essay, on the additional information section, on supplemental essays, on test scores and how often to test and what we really think about them and how awful the SAT and ACT are. Wait, what? Or anything else that sort of that we really touched on very lightly tonight, because we're trying to give you a holistic view. But please feel free to follow up with us anytime via email if you have questions, and we hope to see you again via Fiveable. We thank them for dealing with our connectivity issues today in our multiple time zones, and we hope to see you again soon. Katherine, is there
I want to put in a plug for our presentation on Wednesday, in which we will have slides up, and that's basically an overview of different kinds of schools geographically and sizes and what else? That overview of schools.
So take note of that SBS scholarship with Fiveable, and we hope to see you soon.
Bye.